Or all right, here we go. Hey, welcome to another pre-selection Sunday podcast with TK Brackets, Tim Kruger, and along with me, Dave Almond. Hey, Dave.
Hey Tim, how are you this morning?
Well, I'm just on my first cup. I know you've got a pot down, so
We're getting there anyway.
oh man. All right, yeah, gonna be a lot of late nights. I've already gone without any sleep, so it's gonna be another one more night, and then I can sleep, as we say. All right, so we just thought we'd get together and just hash over some things real quickly. We're gonna make this very short. But let's just start at the top, Dave, and make sure, first of all, Bracketville, thank you so much. The subscribers are going through the roof. So go over to Bracketville if you're not a subscriber. Do that, please. And um, we've just had a tremendous success this year, and we're so happy about it. All right, let's just start at the top. Top line, I think, is pretty much set. I don't see any movement there. The big news is that second line. Uh, St. John's moving into the overall number 8 seed and the last seed in the 2 line. You agree, Mr. Almond?
Yes, I think after the events of the last couple of days, it's made it pretty easy for the committee and clear to have the two line going into at least this Saturday as Alabama, Tennessee, Michigan State, and St. John's. So I think in that order, and my guess is, if Alabama or Tennessee could still supplant Florida, but those three are going to be in some order, and then most likely followed by Michigan State and St. John's.
Yeah, I think that in the way I look at it is the fact that the big 4 all got to the semifinals, which wasn't could have been a question, but they got there fairly easily. Auburn, had a little bit of a struggle, but I think because of that, I think they're all going to stay in the same position, frankly. I just don't see somebody passing Florida at this point with one game. And, we got to use our knowledge, right? And our past knowledge.
Yeah.
And we know good and well the committee does not move teams uh, up and down because it's only one data point on about 35 now. So, but yeah, I agree with St. John's. The thing that just jumps out at me every time I look at them is, um, when you just look at the team sheet, the first thing, they're 29-4 for a power conference team. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
now,
the Big East
again,
hasn't provided them high end wins this year, but
no,
the totality of their resume at this point compared to the others, I think, makes them a clear and what we would call an easy choice
right. Yep.
for the two. And why make things difficult on yourself? The downside for St. John's, I suppose, is that they could very well be sent west
Yes.
as a two
But
seed, as opposed to potentially being east or midwest as a three.
but that works out perfect if you have BYU in the 7th slot because then they can go west with them and get in the Providence pod and have a Thursday, Saturday, and everybody's happy. Um, so yeah, easy, and of course I can't not mention this without they're playing Creighton tonight in the Big East Finals. All right. Um. All right. So let's go down to 3. Like not too much on the 3 and 4, but I personally think I haven't totally scrubbed it as I said, but in my bracket came out this morning, I did move Arizona back up to the 4 line. I think they've done enough. Uh, I also moved Michigan. I had them down a little bit in 6. I moved them back up to the top of the 5, right there with Clemson, and Purdue's barely hanging on a thread with me. They could get bumped if I scrub later. How about you?
Yeah, it sounds very similar. For right now, I'm leaving Iowa State as my 12 and Wisconsin as my 13. But I think if Wisconsin upsets Michigan State today, this is where the committee on Sunday and late tonight, when they go back through and do some scrubbing, you're not really greatly altering. You're not going to move teams like 5 seed lines or something, but those break lines. I
Yeah.
think if that happens, I think Wisconsin's got a good chance to end up being at 12 and get the final 3 seed. And then I too sort of have it split 16 and 17 this morning with Purdue and Michigan. Debating on that because Michigan's now won 2 of the 3 meetings between the two. Purdue had a better out of conference showing, so it's right there. And then, you still got Oregon in that mix. I think their loss to Michigan State makes it easier to bump them down with their predictive metrics. And then the final two spots for me are, Clemson and Ole Miss. Ole Miss, yes, they lost again, but they lost to, top ranked team yesterday and made it a game. So at least that's, BYU's right potentially in that mix, but I think their non-conference strength of schedule might be a little hairy for them. But I could see that the last group of Ole Miss, Clemson, BYU going in about any order, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I have temporarily until I do further work later tonight. I have moved Wisconsin to that number 12 and Iowa State 13. It was close, but I just think preponderance of wins here and is past Iowa State. And if you look at Iowa State too, I think they're since the reveal, if you want to use that as a marker, and it's not any historical marker, but it is kind of an idea. I think they're like 3-4-5. I mean, they're underwater since then, so they haven't played as well down the stretch. All right. What about Marquette? They seem to be a problem with everybody right now. All of a sudden, I don't think we can have all the Big East teams at 7 and 8, but it looks like it might happen. I've got them the very last six this morning, and I'm probably I'll sink down because I've got a team or two there that I think need to move up to 6.
Well, so I had, Marquette toward the upper part of the 7 line. And so now it gets interesting because, they're just, as we've talked about before, they're in this collection of teams that it's the eye of the beholder. What is the committee going to pull out that they're going to like about certain teams and like a little less about some others? For example, you've in this next group, in that same grouping with Marquette, you're now looking at teams like UCLA, Missouri, Louisville, St. Mary's, Kansas, Illinois, and Gonzaga. And so how you see, the one thing I would say, I don't know how the committee is going to look at it, but I believe Marquette has beaten one tournament team, and that was Xavier, since early January. As we talked before, they kind of had a front-loaded conference schedule. In the back end, they won games, but they were against teams from the Big East that aren't going to make the field. So, Marquette had a really good non-conference. So it gets really iffy here. And then the two biggest questions for me in that same group are then how do they handle St. Mary's and Gonzaga? Because, Gonzaga's net rating is off the chart. So are they going to put a team that's in the top 10 of their net in an 8-9 game? Their resume screams 8-9, but I don't know that the committee will do that. And then St. Mary's, now that Gonzaga got them once, is not as clearly ahead as they were. And I think with Louisville beating Clemson again last night, I can't see Louisville being an 8 seed with their overall record and 2 wins against Clemson. And so then it becomes, you start scrubbing them into this, and they're and I might be off by one off my memory here, but 26-6 now this morning.
Right.
I want to say with, just a dominant run. Yes, the ACC's been down. We all know that, but they beat Carolina. They beat Clemson twice. So it would be really hard for me. You could make a case for Kansas and Illinois ahead of them based on totality of better wins and Missouri. But there also comes a point, as we've talked before, Tim, of just win totals against teams. And really, they have one Georgia Tech loss on the road, but they don't have anything else that's remotely not a tournament team. Where like St. Mary's has lost to a couple of non-tournament teams. Kansas has lost to a couple of non-tournament teams. Illinois has lost to 4 teams that aren't going to be in the tournament. So, those, and that, to me, then you get like Kansas and Illinois. The difference, their kind of resumes are right next to each other on the net sheet. except for me, like, okay, well, Kansas did beat Duke and Michigan State at some point.
Yeah.
They have a couple on the higher end where my one concern with Illinois all along is they just don't have a true net elite level victory. Right? They have a good win at Oregon. They have a good win at home against Purdue. They beat Wisconsin at home. But they don't have that elite win per the net. So I think that maybe drops Illinois back to somewhere along the top of the 7 line. For me, I mean, Louisville's got theoretically 2 better wins than they do against Clemson.
I have them actually. Yeah. Every time I think about the middle, I think, oh, I've got that figured out. And then when I pop up my seed list, I'm like, oh man, what a mess. I've got Illinois actually number 27 overall right now. But I've got some issues. Like I got to figure out BYU. Are they going to stay where I have them? And then below that is where I've got some really good teams, I think, that don't deserve 8s. I know a lot of people had Creighton in 9. I have them the last 8, but I've got UConn, Louisville, Kansas, Creighton. If the thing that jumps out at you at Kansas, if you haven't really paid attention much, you look at them, they're 21-12. I mean, that's a record there you see down toward the bubble, So are they going to go by the name on the chest, or are they going to really look at that resume? And it's really, as you just mentioned, it's not that deep. It really is not.
No, and I think that's where this gets tricky, because like I ended up this morning with Marquette, Creighton, and Connecticut all on my 8 line. But because I think you got Mississippi State, who's in that same conversation. They're
right.
I mean, they haven't beat a heavyweight. That's where maybe Connecticut gets a little bit of a thing against their quad 1A.
Connecticut's, when you compare Connecticut and Creighton, even though Creighton's beaten 2 out of 3 now, their resume is just a little stronger.
But I mean, put it this way, I can see them right next to each other.
Sure.
And so then, Memphis has the wins, but they have the 3 Q3 losses, and the predictive metrics suggest they're a double-digit seeded. They're not going to get that. But, that's the other question, how the committee is going to handle Memphis. I could see them anywhere from the bottom of the 6 to the top of the 7 to, an 8 seed, assuming that they win their conference tournament. If they lose like to Tulane today, then I think the whole 9 seed becomes a question for them.
I've got them the last 6, but it was just
I can't argue. The thing with this, Tim, I can't argue with it. It's like I said, it's sort of a beauty in the eye of the beholder.
I've got kind of Gonzaga, St. Mary's, Memphis, all kind of in a cluster there, because they're all the teams that were with a big question mark on, right? One last question, then we'll get to the bottom. So Creighton, St. John's tonight for the Big East title. Everybody's asking me, can Creighton get to a 7 with a win? Would that be a big enough win? Because obviously they added a Q1 last night.
Put it this way, in the final scrub, I think having beaten St. John's twice, I think gives them a little more caveat over, like, say, a Marquette to be in that same spot, right? So yeah, I could see that. And then, then it gets really interesting, because then you start getting into the whole, well, who's falling down, right?
Then we've got 7 teams on the 7 line.
And that's really what we have. If you want to break it down, we have like 12 teams that should be 6 or 7 seeds. Yeah, but the reality is there's not enough spots for 12 teams on 2 lines. So
perfect.
3 or 4 of them are going to end up 8s.
Yeah. And
so what we need to do, Tim, is just make them all 7s and split the difference, and then we'll be closer on our scores.
We kind of get that cut in the middle of the 9 line, and then all of a sudden there, you just move anybody. All right. So Mountain West, want to talk. We got Colorado State. They have a chance to win the conference, which I think, well, I don't think I would get them in. I don't know right now if they've done enough, but it's close. They're at least in the conversation.
Yeah, and to me, Boise's also the interesting question, right? Because now they've, Colorado State just beat them, but then they just beat New Mexico. And they beat Clemson and they beat St. Mary's, I believe, out of conference. So, but they also have a quad 4 loss, and, there's some. So it gets really interesting to me, Tim, the biggest questions, and we'll talk about the biggest elephant in the room here in a second, but you sort of have this hierarchy of how are you going to rank. Let's say, for example, I think the cleanest thing for the bubble is for Boise to beat Colorado State tonight.
I think so.
Because then Boise gets the automatic qualifier and Colorado State becomes a less likely
Candidate, yeah.
at-large scenario. But if, for example, Colorado State wins tonight, then you have this trifecta of trying to figure out, well, we'll talk about what the committee we think they're going to do with Texas in a minute, but then you have this thing of Indiana, Xavier, Boise State, and then throw in, just for the sake of conversation, North Carolina into that mix. 4 teams for one spot potentially. And how is the committee going to order that? Because one way or the other, we're going to lose a previous spot tonight because either Boise or Colorado State is going to win.
Right. Yeah. One of those is going to get in. I had it, and I've had it pretty consistent. I've had Boise in for the last week here, but I have my 11s. I moved Drake down a spot just because it kind of fit as a nice cutoff right now. They might not end up here. I think they're really a 10, but I have in the top 11. Then I have number 42, San Diego State, just the last team before the play-ins. Even though they've been losing, when you look at the resume, it's just slightly better than those other teams. And then I've gone Baylor, Boise, Indiana, and the elephant in the room, Texas. My first out right now is Colorado State, just because we're just kind of in a holding pattern. And then obviously you got Xavier and North Carolina. Let's start with those two, and then we'll work quickly back and we'll wrap this up. So Carolina, I mean, you had a guy step in the lane, which cost you probably an NCAA bid. Think about that. But hey, that's maybe the cap on their season, right? So you got Carolina and Xavier both have one win in quad one. I'm sorry, Xavier went to 2. I didn't check this
and then
morning.
it went back to 1 this morning.
Back to 1 this morning. Thanks.
Yeah,
to
Creighton did
Creighton's hurting itself actually, but anyway. All right, so you have one win, one quad one win. Now with North Carolina, I'm sorry, I understand their metrics are good, but they have one win against the field. Have we ever seen that?
I mean,
that wasn't a mid-major.
I mean, the reality is Carolina's only boast, beyond the fact that Carolina's on their jersey, and I really don't think that plays a huge factor. I know there's people out there that do, but is their metrics. But, after losing again, it's not like we're talking about a team that's 18th in the metrics. Right. We're talking about a team in the mid to upper 30s. And if you don't have anything else, it's just when you've had 12 chances against quad one and you got one of them, and that was back before a conference season by 2 points against UCLA. And that also happens to be because you didn't beat Clemson, Louisville, or Duke, despite 3 chances. I mean,
wounded
I
Duke.
can be wrong.
A wounded Duke.
Right. And I certainly can be wrong on this. With this kind of crazy year, you're going to have to get a little bit lucky to get all
60, 68,
37 at-large bids. But anyway, the committee can do what they're going to do. I don't know how you justify taking North Carolina even over a Xavier, who's 1-9 with the change this morning, but they do have 3 wins over the field.
Yeah, right. But I still don't think
And then you've got a team
enough.
like Indiana also in there who, again, metrically not as nice for IU, but then you come down, one of the things I went through this morning is if you come down to Indiana and Xavier, who are you taking? Metrics slightly say Xavier. Watching them play recently, I would probably lean that way too. At the same time, Indiana's got the win at Michigan State. They got a win over Purdue. And they've got, 2 other quad one wins. So 4 and 12 isn't, isn't great either. So, that's kind of that, and then throw Boise, because today, theoretically, for me anyway, Colorado State's the AQ because they're the higher seed in the conference tournament. They're the
Yeah.
2 seed and Boise was the 5.
Yeah. So
So by
technically, yeah.
default, today, when my updated bracket comes out later this morning, Colorado State will be in as the default AQ. So that puts Boise into the at large. So that leaves you basically, in my mind, Boise, Indiana, and Xavier for the final at large spot heading into today.
Yeah, I did it at 1:30 in the morning, and I did leave New Mexico in, so I apologize to everybody out there. So,
That's
yeah,
all right.
you just replaced.
Nobody's gonna.
You just
98%
replaced.
of the people wouldn't know.
I would just replace Colorado's. I would replace Texas on my seed list with Colorado State, and they would be in there. Yeah, that's how it would work. And then San Diego State would be back in the playing game. Yeah, so that's that. And then Texas is 19 and 15. We've discussed the 19 and 15 scenarios. It's happened 3 times before in the NCAA tournament. Each time that team with 15 loss had to have 19 or more wins. They also won 2 games in the conference tournament, one of which was against either a ranked team or a team that was very highly seeded. Same thing happened with Texas. They followed the exact path, and they were kind of the forgotten team coming into this. And you have to remember, the committee wasn't doing a bracket last week, okay? So they're looking at this fresh, where we kind of have a prejudice against Texas because we've had them out until this week. So I think that's important. The other important thing to mention, I want to mention quickly before we leave, is Texas. The committee did say they're not going to do those final seedings and actually final picking of teams until today and later today because they wanted to see all the results. So I think that helps Texas. What do you think?
I mean, Texas is the big elephant in the room because what you have is a team with 7 quad 1 wins, which I believe one of our mock committee members, noted yesterday that no team's been left out with 7 quad 1 wins. But also, we've never seen a team get in that's 3 games under 500 against quads 1 to 3. So something's going to have to give with Texas. Either their non-conference strength of schedule and their pile of losses, which have created an effective record of like 12 and 15, is going to win the day. And the committee said, I'm sorry, a lot of great wins, but that's not enough. Or they're going to look around in the bubble and say, yeah, but nobody else in this arena has anywhere near the quality of wins that Texas does, including 2 just on neutral courts against teams that I think Vanderbilt's another interesting study, but we don't have time to get into that
Yeah,
for
they
now.
are.
But
They're closer than people think.
And here's the other thing. If the committee is going to have a problem with 19 and 15, which I thoroughly get, then I think you got to have a problem with Baylor at 18 and 14, who has better metrics, right? And they're right even
But a thinner resume.
Because of their non-conference schedule. They're right even at the Mendoza line for 1 to 3, but they don't have near the same high level wins that Texas does.
Right. Yeah. And now that Texas is one, I believe I had it down as 4 times away from home too. 2 neutrals and 2 roads. So against teams in the field. So that's something to hang your hat on too. They beat Oklahoma, Mississippi State on the road, and they beat obviously A&M and Vanderbilt on neutrals. So
yeah, I mean, again,
I think that's just too strong for me to leave them to take Xavier or Xavier, and it's not like Xavier in North Carolina didn't have tons of chances. Okay, they did.
Yeah,
they did. Now, is it? I feel worse for Xavier simply because, as we mentioned, UConn and Marquette kind of didn't hold up their end of the bargain here coming down the stretch, and that could have helped Xavier's resume a little bit. All right. Well, hey, I got to run. I got to go to this deal today for a family thing. So, and then I have to cover Creighton tonight. So I'm gonna be up late. I'm not really, maybe I'll do the best I ever did by not moving everybody around and putting a microscope under. We've said that a million times, right? But don't worry, folks. I'll get it done. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it. I know today is a busy day for everyone, and you're fighting through some electrical problems there, so I appreciate it. Everybody, go to Brackville, man. We got stuff pumped out all the time, and my subscribers that I've talked to are just love that fact that they get the updates of everything we do. So thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Dave. Have a good day.
You too, Tim. Take care.
All right. Thanks.